How do you beat the low live stakes? Learning to adjust your strategies and your tactics from villain to villain, hand to hand, session to session, and ignoring the variance. Today, we do all three. Let's talk about it. Hey, my poker homies, it's your poker caddy Choppadong once again coming to you from the Caddy Shack. And today we've got three hands with you. We want to discuss, we're going to put them up right here shortly, and we're going to talk about the adjustments that we make as we walk through these hands. So let's dive in. Let's thank DFS Army and the Sharp app for supporting the channel, and let's talk about it. Because if you want to play that winning brand of poker, you absolutely have to be able to make these adjustments. You might play two hands differently against the same guy based on what you learned. And hand 1 and 2 are going to show you just that. Same villain, different hands. In the first hand, we're against a rather aggressive villain that can overplay some spots, and we know this. He can overplay his cards, marginal cards. We're about 250 bucks effective, and we have ourselves ace king of clubs in middle position. The button just calls, and it's a rather fishy player. The villain in the big blind, however, 3 bets to 40. That was a little bit of a surprise. Didn't think he would do that out of position. We have to now put him on a range of hands. We feel probably some suited broadways, but certainly the big pocket pairs, ace king, ace queen suited type hands are definitely in that range. How do we want to respond? Well, when we're sitting here in the middle of the action, we can just call, we can squeeze, we can 4-bet back. Putting him on a stronger range, he's coming over us with queens, kings, aces, things like that. We don't necessarily want to see that. We don't mind taking this hand multi-way, so we just call, hoping the button calls along. He does not. He gets out of the way, and now we're heads up in position versus the aggressor. Again, fine. We know what to do here. We have shortened our stack to pot ratio, which we'll talk about in other videos. We can probably kind of just call this one down. We're sitting on 250. What's left over is about 210, and we're in a $90 pot. That SPR is about 2 to 2.5, right? So top pairs mathematically usually pretty good here without super solid reads, which we don't have against his villain. So the plan in position, if he gets aggressive, we'll just let him blow his stack into us as long as we flop well. And we might even, if checked to, we might get a little bit aggressive with the hand ourselves. As is, $90 flop, 7 of clubs, 5 of clubs, deuce of diamonds. We flop 2 overs and the nut flush draw. Great flop for us. We're hoping if he checks to us, we're going to bet it normal. We're just going to kind of slowly try to put the money in the pot. If he bets into us here, we might just dump him all in and put him to the test. Now, we don't want to do that against those over pairs. But if our outs are clean, if our aces and our kings are clean, we are upwards of a 60% favorite in this hand. We're fine. We don't get that chance. He jams right into us. He just opened flat out, bam, puts it all right into us on the flop. And we thought, what changed? Well, nothing changed. We still have the same equity we have against a range like that. And in fact, he might even be doing that as a bluff to over bet that pot and jam on it, hoping we fold out hands like ace king. So he could be on a worse flush draw. He could be on a lower pocket pair, 10s, 9s, 8s. If he can 3-bet those pre-flop, he might be on a very, very wide range here. Again, against that type of a range, we're at least 50-50. There's $90 worth of dead money in the pot. Yeah, it's an over bet, but yeah, we hit the flop too. All right, let's do it. We get the money in good, and of course he has pocket 8s, and we fade the world, and we lose. That does not mean we played the hand poorly. It does not mean we played the hand wrong. Our read was fine. Our action was fine. We had the courage to follow through on it. We did fine. That's just bad results, right? And we don't focus on the results if we're trying to beat poker. We focus on the long run and trying to beat the game and beat variance down the road, because these hands are going to go for us as much as they go against us. And with $90 in dead money sitting out there, that actually tips the tide pretty strongly in our favor. Even if it was 50-50, that $90 is the profit in that spot. As it is, we had a little more than 50% versus the pocket 8s. Same villain. We've adjusted. Okay, he can do that with pocket 8s. He can be that aggressive and be that wide and potentially be that turn his hand into a bluff type, bluffy type of player. Fine. We can make that adjustment. Next time we get into a hand with him, he raises from mid position. Checking my notes here, checking my notes. He raises from mid position here to 10. The hijack in the middle calls, and we are sitting on the button with ace deuce of diamonds. That's another hand that we can turn into a polarized 3-bet if we think he can fold. We don't think so. We're sitting on the button. We can just take this flop multi-ways and see what happens, right? Keep that let's keep the pots small until it's time to make them big most of the time. And in this scenario, we get a three-way flop, king of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, 6 of diamonds. We flop these nuts. Now what? In a lot of spots, we can play aggressive. In a lot of spots, we can play passive. But against an aggressive opponent who's liable to drive the action into you on a bluff, in these types of spots, it's oftentimes best to sit back and let him blow into you. Now, I'm going to get aggressive with my high equity bluffs when I'm not there yet. That's when I'm going to check raise. That's when I'm going to 3-bet. That's when I'm going to jam, because I want that fold equity if he doesn't have anything, because I don't have a hand yet myself. But when I have that hand, it's almost time to just buckle up and just ride this thing down. It comes off as a slow play and a trap, but it's a very strategic way to play against these aggressive villains. Flop checks through. Once that flop checks through, all bets are off. Don't know where he's at, don't know what he has, but we have position. We get to see it twice, and it's not usually getting around twice. He's going to take a stab. We check that back. Then, I mean, yeah, we're going to get value out of lone diamonds, queen of diamonds, jack of diamonds, things like that. But without the ace or the king, usually those hands are afraid of the ace and the king, and they don't get too crazy. So we're planning to take the turn with an evaluative approach. On that queen of spades, he now leads into us for 30 bucks. Hijack gets out of the way, and we just make the call. Yes, he could have king queen. He would have bet that flop. Yeah, he could have pocket eights. He would have bet that flop. Odds are he doesn't have much. And if we raise him, he's going to put us on king queen or something very, very strong, because the monotone nature of this hand. $90 river. Ace of hearts. That cuts out the chances that he might have an ace. Ace queen, ace king, something like that, which again, he would have bet ace king on that flop. He would have bet ace king, ace queen on the turn, and we could maybe get some kind of a raise out of him. Now we're just kind of hoping that he does have something. If he doesn't have anything, fine. We picked up, 30 bucks, 60 bucks worth of bluffs out of him. He leads on that ace again to $30. Same bet size, 30 on the turn, 30 on, he doesn't have much. So we're, instead of really going crazy and really putting him to a test, we're going to value raise him. We're going to size down. We probably still went a little big with, with $100 raise back to him. Probably should have made it 60, 65, make him, an offer he can't refuse type of situation. But we probably still got a smidge greedy, thinking that maybe he has the 2 pair. We don't want to leave that value on the table. Man, if he hit that straight on the river, then he is absolutely blowing into us, and he's going to 3-bet us. So we wanted to size down some to make that hand. We were targeting bigger, maybe flushes, 2 pair hands, things that can't fold. But in this case, we sized down a little to give him room to come over the top of us if he really was coolered himself. It just didn't work. He had ace jack, but he did have the jack of diamonds. He's willing to bluff, and then he value bet a little bit on that, thinking that maybe we don't have much ourselves, I guess. And when we raised, he knew that we weren't bluffing, and he knew that probably put us on what he thought and he said was king queen, which is a great result for us because he misread our hand, he misread our range. He was right that he was beat, but had he had that 10 of diamonds, or had he, had a baby flush or something, he was coming, or 2 pair, a different 2, he's liable to ace jack, if he has ace queen, ace 8, something like that, he beats king queen, he probably overplays his hand and jams, and we've got it. So again, we played that hand 2 different ways against that same villain after an adjustment. We played the 2 different hands, 2 different ways. And the beauty of it is we were right both times. Now, the outcome didn't work out for us. And that leads into the next hand. A couple of hours later, we had a completely different villain. And this is point 3 of playing different villains differently. This is not the same villain anymore. This is a different one. And when we put this hand up here, you'll see that we had pocket 5s on the button. And it limps around, and we can raise here to 10, 12, 15 bucks, sweeten the pot some. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. This time we didn't. The small blind was a tighter player, and the big blind was, I had him, it's hard to categorize him. He's a little tight passive, but he's very straightforward, and he can be kind of aggressive. So he's not truly an old man coffee or truly an ABC type of player, but he mostly is. So I called him straightforward and subdued, if that makes sense. He raised out of the big blind, though, to 17. That's a serious raise for him. Into a multi-way field and raising a little bigger than 10 to 15 bucks, that's a serious raise for him. Aces, kings, queens, maybe jacks. Ace, king, maybe. Ace, queen, maybe. I don't know. He's got probably the very top end of his range in a scenario like this. So it's a perfect opportunity to, set mine and take those pocket fives post flop, being that we're 400 something deep, right? And everybody folds after that $17 raise around to us on the button. We make the call. Small blind makes the call, who's a very tight player. So now we know he's probably on a pocket pair of his own, and we don't want to get set over set here when we flop. But we flop ace queen five. Flopping ace queen five in a $54 pot, 400 deep, that's a pretty good scenario. Ace king, we don't want to see aces, we don't want to see queens, but we don't think the small blind has those. He probably missed his set, we hit ours. Ace king, ace queen, maybe a king queenish type of hand could be in there, but probably not. Probably aces, queens, ace queen, maybe ace king. When you factor in that range into a poker calculator, ace queen, ace king, aces, and queens, we are 70% on that flop. That's a good scenario for us. But we also have to understand that against such a straightforward, now against the former aggressive player, if he bets into us here, we're raising. And he's on way more than aces and queens in ace king and ace queen, right? He's got a wider range than that, and he's more aggressive. He won't maybe believe, whatever. We can get frisky with that. Plus, there's a flush draw on this board. However, when we are playing against a more straightforward player, we have to respect that bet. Now, when he checks to us on the flop, the small blind checks, the initial raiser, and the big blind checks, comes all the way around to us on the button, and we bet 15 bucks. Why? We want, if they call, good. They're probably not on two pair and sets. When the small blind calls and then the big blind check raises us to 45, alarm bells should be going off. What is that range? Again, aces, queens, ace queen, ace king. We're still 70% against it, but we have to be careful. Now, we want to win this hand. We have to keep his range as wide open as possible, right? If he is bluffing or if he is overplaying ace king or ace queen, we have to continue to let him. If we raise back here, which a lot of people want, oh, I got a set, I'm all in. Only aces and queens are calling you. Ace queen can maybe fold. Ace king certainly folds. You lose the worst parts of his range. You want to keep those in this hand. So we just call that check raise, knowing that we're trying to keep ace queen and ace king in this range. That's what keeps this hand profitable. If we're not going to fold now, which why would we? If we're not going to fold now because we don't have that strong of a read, then we need to keep his range wide open. That's an adjustment many, many, many low stakes players don't make. Now, when that turn hits with that 8 of hearts on the $160 pot, same thing. He leads out 125 bucks. Now he's not effing around. We have to be careful here. We just call. He's not doing this with the flush draw at this point. He's on aces, queens, ace king, ace queen, maybe ace king, like we've mentioned 1,000 times. The problem with this hand is what happens on the river. $410 pot, and the queen pairs the board. Yes, we have bottom boat, but what do we beat? The answer is nothing. Nothing. When he leads 200 out into the $410 pot, he's not barreling 3 streets like that. Check, raise, lead with ace king. No, not on that pair board. He's putting us on trip queens at a minimum. He wants to get paid. He is on ace queen that just filled up, or aces, or maybe even quad queens if he has that, lone combo. And that's where Hero can possibly find a fold. Would it be smart? You only need to be right about, what, a third of the time or so, 200 to what would have been, 200 to win 800, you need to be right about 25% of the time. That's probably a bad fold if there's any chance that he is just spaz bluffing, if there's any chance he's got king queen, if there's any chance he has it. And Hero just couldn't quite get there with his read. Now, I think it can be a fold. I think it's a very dicey fold, but if you ever in an $800 pot that's only costing you $200, if you ever fold incorrectly there and get shown the worst hand, that's a disaster. That's a lot of your win rate down the tube. So we called it off and we got shown ace queen, and yeah, we were kind of ticked off about it. But I want to explain the fact that against a more aggressive villain, we're going to push that. We're going to raise with that set of fives. But against this particular villain, we had to be correct in our heads, and we had to sit back and be patient and say, this guy's going to keep betting into us with worse. And if we raise him, he'll stop. We have to be ready for those types of. We have to, again, villain to villain, hand to hand, session to session. And you have to remember these things for the next time you see these people. This is what makes you make better decisions than your opponents in these low live stakes games. And this is what makes you a profitable player, is when you can make these types of adjustments. So hopefully, sitting in here with a poker caddy, again, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, comment down below if you think villain could fold. If you think you're never folding a set, there's a pretty good rule, actually. Never fold sets at $1, $2, or $1, $3 no limit. You're probably okay. This is, you can call this off incorrectly and still beat these games because you just kind of got coolered. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't go back to the lab, back to the caddy shack, and talk about these things and find out if there are spots where we can make bigger laydowns, because those do help too, and knowing when to do it. And this was almost the villain type that we can do it with. So that said, again, if you like the videos, give me a comment. I'll comment back. And we'll get outside more. Weather's warming up. We'll go maybe play some golf as a poker caddy. We'll maybe, who knows, spring fishing's coming around the corner. We're going to do a whole bunch of fun stuff outside as the poker caddy when we leave the caddy shack and talk about these hands and the world that is low live stakes poker. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple of days with another video to talk about. Take care.